Hello, my name is Spilo, and I just spent 30 minutes recording myself on the scouting report, only to realize afterwards that my mic was not functioning properly, so I have to re-record. So second time's the charm. I'm going to try not weep on camera. This is the London Spitfire scouting report, the fourth scouting report I've done so far, and full transparency, I am a bit of a London Spitfire fan myself. I grew up to be a fan of them from their performance as British Hurricane and contenders. I always thought they were an amazing team. The synergy was good. They found the way to make team play just look phenomenal. But something's missing. I've said this publicly before, but the team that almost beat American Tornado in the gauntlet and was consistently dominating European contenders would have beaten Boston, would have beaten Toronto, and might have even beaten the Gladiators as well. So what's missing? What's going on? Why is this team not going as well? And again, we know that it's not really our job to really guess that from an internal standpoint. Maybe there's a DPS diff where not necessarily the mechanics aren't good enough, but maybe the communication or synergy just isn't quite there. Maybe there's a lack of confidence. The competition certainly is tougher, of course. But we're going to be looking at things from an external side of things and trying to figure out what exactly a team is struggling at from a macro or just raw Overwatch side of things. So again, this isn't exactly going to solve necessarily all of their issues, certainly not, but we can actually talk about from the outside, whatever is causing these issues are certainly why they're losing team fights. So we're gonna get right into it. Starting with macro, forced aggression passage choke. By the way, I do know my face cam is a little bit in the way, so I'm gonna actually zoom this in. That should be a little better. Okay, forced aggression past a choke. So in other words, this is something that we saw really from every team, and I've brought it up consistently over and over and over again, and it really gets my goat. However, it was more of an issue with London than it is with most other teams that we've looked at. Dallas was certainly a big offender with this one, but at least they set it up properly. In other words, they'd push past the choke, but there was like great timing, and it was a good plan, and then maybe they'd have an angle on it as well, and so it was kind of a feed, but it ended up working out. With London, usually not so much. A lot of aggression past a choke without consistent setup. So if you're pushing past a choke into enemy team map control, you really need to preemptively set up a goofy angle ahead of time. If you guys want to give a good example of this, you can think about how Boston on Lijiang Tower Garden had Young Bong hiding in White Room and for a flank nade. Now, pushing all the way into White is kind of a feat from Boston, but they didn't have a lot of ultimates, at least they weren't confident they would win the ult trade, and so they set up a really aggressive angle with Myeongbong to make that sort of a feed plan work, and it almost worked, right? London not so consistent with doing things like that. When they're going to go that aggressive, they're not always very consistent at setting up those angles preemptively. For example, bobbing through a choke on Blizzard World's second defense. Nobody set up the off angle off of that. The bob goes into the back line and dies, and London just goes, and nothing happens. No actual fight, no pressure, no angle, no value, no nothing. Dorado first defense pushing up against Boston. We're going to run through the choke, and they do win this fight, but there's no pincer. Shaxx is nowhere in position to be able to pincer off of this from beneath him. That's a problem. Volsky is second defense. Heidi's going to mine the opposite high ground, but it was only Brig and Zarya who were able to find value. Ashe, Zen, Tracer, none of them were in position to follow up off of that. So it almost feels like there's something falling out in the planning stage. Not only is the macro fundamental of pushing that aggressively not good, but if you're going to do it, at least have the dignity of setting up a proper off angle, and that was just not consistently happening. Anubis defense was just a train wreck of setting up these off angle pincers, not pushing in aggressively enough. So if you're gonna do it, you gotta commit, but instead we're gonna drag it through a choke, get one kill, and then that's it. You don't even win the team fight. They're just going to sit and wait for the respawn. In fact, they threw Anubis defense by Doomfist ulting past the choke, but nobody actually hard committed through the choke hard enough for it to work. It was only a Rhine pin, but my other DPS, my tanks, my supports just are not in a position to aggressively push hard enough, and that ended up costing them. Okay. Excuse me. Over ulted when up could be a preparation or comms problem. In other words, fights won. We're winning this. We don't need any more ultimates, but we're going to keep committing ultimates. Could be a lack of confidence that they're not sure that they're going to actually put it away. So there's a little bit of fear in there. But it also could be that there's a lack of communication about mid-fight, guys. I'm 90% of this. Let's just use this and then this. If we need another ultimate, that's the ultimate that we're going to use. There's a lot of fights where we're using 4 ultimates when we just really needed 2 or 1, and that needs to be sorted out. Backline giving up strong high ground positioning and doesn't retake positioning in general. Sometimes individually, so Brig, Zen, BAP, sometimes individual errors, sometimes as a unit, not rotating well, not positioning well. And this was a big problem with the London Spitfire. Backline looked to be very weak when it came to positional issues. A lot of splitting, Well, that's not really fair. Not a lot of splitting, but a lot of situations where why are we positioned out in the open? Why are we giving up the high ground here? Why are we rotating this way? Why did we just fail that rotate? That can't be happening. Like I said, sometimes individually from Reaper, from Kellex, sometimes from Molfig, but usually as a unit, just not looking very good. For example, Blizzard World's second defense. We through second defense, and the reason why we lost Blizzard World or got snowballed in Blizzard World is because I see Brig Zenyatta playing literally out in the open on high ground, no cover, no corner. The enemy team peeks, they pop rally, and we have rally and trance. We could have sat on the opposite corner, spammed them out, kited out, waited out rally, and then recontested high ground. But instead, we're caught out in the open. We panic rally, and then Yunbong hits a couple shots through rally and chunks Reaper down, who then also has to trance. And then we give up high ground at the same time. So we not only blew both support ultimates, we gave up high ground, and then we lose to grab. And it was just an absolute train wreck of positional corner discipline, the fundamentals of Overwatch, and it was just very hard to watch. So Backline needs to sort this stuff out for sure. Communicational disconnect, just in general, the synergy from this team doesn't seem to be as clean as it could be. Backline, frontline with, when can they push, who can they push, who needs peel, who needs pressure, what are we doing, what's the plan? Not consistent. Again, not the British Hurricane vibe that we used to get from this team. The confidence, the coordination, it's just not there. At least not consistently. With dive, London doesn't pressure enough before or after dive cycle, not aggro enough holding space versus brawl your dive. So if you're playing Brig Zen, it's important that you're not just thinking about peeling off the enemy dive, but that you're preventing the enemy dive from being full strength in the first place. And that's going to be by pocketing your tracer, pocketing your ash, pocketing your ball, discording the flankers, things like that. A lot of times I'm seeing not enough aggression from Hybrid, and he's just not being supported. Not enough aggression from Hattie, and he's struggling to know what to do or how to position. And not enough aggression from Shax. I've seen Kellex stacking with my Zen over and over and over again and not actually peeking afterwards. I'm seeing dive comes in and fails, and the backline's still playing passive. When we should be, okay, they just failed cooldowns. Let's go. Let's start spamming these guys. They just smack them in the face. They did better when they were on Brawl into dive and that kind of like cyclical pressure, but there just wasn't enough, like in a way, you play more aggressive than you feel like you should, with angles and more greedy angles, because you know that your harmony, your discord, your armor pack advantage, your spam advantage is something that you need to leverage, not just after the dive, but before the dive starts as well. Timing with Shax and Hadi not consistent. So obviously a little bit of new synergy there. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it was not, but it happened enough to it was a problem with ball and tracer synergy. Timing specifically, don't play around grab well with bubbles and Brig positioning. So we lost a lot of fights to grab full, so it should not be happening. You should position a little more conservatively. If you don't have bubbles, maybe save your bubbles when that enemy Zarya is in a position to grab aggressively. You should certainly have your Zarya or Brig try and split a little more so you don't have both in the grab. So if you're going to lose somebody to a grab pulse, it should just be one, not both. Backline gives up strong high ground positioning for no reason and doesn't retake rotation, sloppy aggression. So again, sloppy positioning in terms of rotations. Our rotations weren't great, giving up high ground for no reason. Blizzard World first defense. Why are we giving up that high ground to rotate towards point? This does not increase our safety. This does not increase our offensive capabilities either. Second attack, giving up high ground is what forced them to commit way too many ultimates to cap second. Volskaya second defense. This is another situation where Reapa's going to give up high ground for no reason. He's got plenty of time to retake it with his Brig and Zarya. Instead, he stays on the low ground, doesn't get any value or benefit from it, and then when the enemy team grabs, he's going to get grabbed underneath the high ground, trance, and the pulse one's going to kill his Zarya, which he would have been able to save if he'd been able to be on top of the actual the high ground there. So it costs him second defense. And then first attack as well, where we've got just a very, very sloppy rotation to go to high ground. You can have your Brigs in splitting, that's normal, but you need to know where are we kiting. And a lot of times Reapa's got his back to the wall. He doesn't know where he's kiting left. He doesn't know if he's kiting right. Kellex just kites in the complete wrong direction. Feeding in situations when we're up, just not very good. Not very impressed from London Spitfire's movement and positioning fundamentals from their backline. It was a big problem. Brawl likes aggressive, unorthodox pincers. Ryan May, Lucio on a flank. Why not? Hanzo here. Lucio's going to speed these guys around here. Why not? It's really where they look their best. King's Row second attack. Ilios, well, Ruins. A lot of unorthodox, weird splits, and I liked it. And it's weird, and it's not completely strategically sound, but it doesn't matter. They did it well. They did it properly timed. There was aggression. There was synergy, and I would like to see more of that, please. Weak baits versus Doomfist, didn't actually step out, no real pressure / bait. So in other words, we're playing up against Doomfist. You can kind of force the Doomfist cooldowns in and then push afterwards, right? But you need, like Dive, need to actually be posing an actual threat. You need an actual bait. You're not going to bait a bear with a tomato, right? You need an actual something good and attractive, right? You could put your Ryan May out there. You could put your Diva out there. You could put your Sigma out there. You could put your McCree out there and just be ready to zip out, amp speed out, right? Maybe Diva booster boop them to make sure they don't follow up. A lot of times it was just, Hattie walks out there and stands with shield. That's weird. The Doomfist is not coming in. You know, my backline's literally like a million miles away, but why aren't they baiting it? Well, obviously, they're not going to fall for that. So there was no real actual baiting going on, at least not quality baiting, and the backline wasn't putting any pressure in between that. So in other words, if you're gonna be standing AFK, at least be spamming really, really hard, and it just wasn't very good. Poor with space control and Brawl. Stacking, not enabling DPS to position well. Junkrat, Kree, Doom, Hanzo, Mei. A lot of stacking. And a lot of the responsibility of this lies in Molfig. He was not positioning particularly well in Sigma. More on that later. But very, very clumped as a whole. Losing a lot to map control. Overall pressure output was much lower. Excuse me. Okay. Moving on to Hattie. Individually. Ball needs to reset / die faster. Fights lost. It's over. Get out of there. Move on to the next fight. Just because you're ball doesn't mean that you should be feeding. That's a lot of ult charge that you're feeding the enemy team and denying your own supports. And then also, yeah, your ball, you'll reset fast, but also you have a much harder job when it comes to staging. So a lot of times where Hattie could have very easily gotten out earlier, the fight was clearly lost and he just doesn't reset fast enough. So it goes with map control versus brawler dives / when he doesn't have bubble. In other words, playing into Ana, Brig, Kree. That's a really tall order for a ball. If you get slept, you're dead. If you get flashed, you're probably dead. If you get bashed, you're probably dead. So that's a very difficult thing to do. But he could have played around a little better. Could be utilizing opportunities to apply pressure from safer angles or better times. And then ultimately, if you just aren't really confident, you could just 2v1 the Tracer. So it's better for him to be actively helping Shaxx 2v1 the enemy Tracer and just prevent him from playing the game. That's actual pressure than doing absolutely nothing. And it felt like a lot of the latter was happening and not a lot of the former. Forces engage past killbox, so he was one of the big offenders of, oh wait, okay, I guess we're aggressing way over there. Well, we can't see you or help you. Good luck. Peak discipline versus damage. In other words, please don't peak the enemy DPS / spam if we're not actually engaging or doing anything, because otherwise, or putting actual pressure when our team can actually follow up of it, because you're just going to get your HP chunked, and obviously we're going to be wasting armor packs and Harmony Orb on you unnecessarily. Mines were usually good, well placed, well timed. The theory behind them, in other words, like what are they trying to accomplish, were good. Could be feeding support ults better. In other words, between fights, nothing's happening. Please do not grab a mega health pack. If you don't need to set up, which he didn't a lot of times, that's 30% trance right there. Like we could be throwing triple armor pack on you and another 15-20% rally. So that's something that happened over and over and over again, and there is literally no drawback to that. It's not a minor thing at all. It's worth bringing up. Mechanics were decent. Ryan ints when pin is up. Please stop pinning when you have an advantage, especially when you have an advantage. Unless your team is all in a position to follow up. You know, I see him inting with pin, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess that fight was won, and now we lose it. And that happened a couple of times. If nothing else, he shouldn't be trading his life for it, and that needs to be cleaned up. Got killed with a shield. The enemy window a couple times, just didn't respect window, even though he had full 8 shield HP and he's still dying. Kind of messy. Not pushing advantage enough sometimes. So this happened a couple of times. Where Anubis, I think, was a good instance, and then also on Havana, where we have an advantage here. Let's go. And he doesn't seem like confident enough to push that advantage. So it could be playing a little bit more aggressively around his HP / shield advantage, especially when there's not a Mei on the table. Shatters were good, not greedy. Just take what's given, whether that's a Diva on an off angle or a BAP slightly mispositioned or just destroying Sato. He was honestly just hard Ryan diffing Sato when it came to Shatters. It was good to watch. Timing with backline sometimes off. Again, team-wide synergy. Like, are we pushing? Are we peeling? Is somebody in the backline peeling, so then I shouldn't be pushing? Mechanics are fine. Just clean up the fire strikes a little bit, please. There was one really clean fire strike on, I think, King's Row first defense against the Defiant. He smacked a BAP from across the map. Was pretty nice. Okay, Shaxx struggles with recall management. Now, I'm not going to go into the micro here because it really was a case-by-case situation of, oh, well, we could have grabbed the health back there, or, oh, we didn't need to pop it there, or, oh, there was an actual risk there, or, oh, our positioning was a little bit bad. But holy smokes, our recall was forced so many times, forced or wasted early so many times, and that got us killed or significantly reduced the pressure that we put afterwards out. That needs to be cleaned up. Especially if you're playing with a Zenyatta and Brig, you should be getting pack and Harmony Orb a lot of the time. So timing with the hottie was off and on, not always bad. Sometimes it was good, but it was enough of a problem that it needs to be addressed. Usually it was shacks going too early and then getting picked or cleared out. So that needs to be cleaned up. Remember, you're rolling really the big ball. Big ball. It draws a lot of attention. Your job is to follow up off of that, not to lead the charge. I need to respect the enemy backline LOS more. So a lot of times we're getting picked because we're greedily peeking into an Ashe LOS, a Zen LOS unnecessarily, and not on an angle or flank, usually stepping directly in front of them and getting chunked. Sometimes look indecisive / unsure of role on Tracer, sometimes mechanically solid. So a couple times, sometimes in like Ilios and some other situations where we didn't really know, like, what are we supposed to be doing here? Like, where are we going? Like, where do I need to be positioning? A little bit on Blizzard World as well, and that needs to be cleaned up. Mechanically solid, not phenomenal, but looks solid. But definitely some question marks about some of the things that we're doing on Tracer with Shax. Calyx, Brig, sloppy with positioning, aggression frequently. In other words, we have an advantage and we're gonna just feed. Full Sky first attack. So when Reaper gets the double headshot kill, everyone's like, whoa! Do not distract yourself from the fact that Calyx almost single-handedly threw that attack. I'm talking they almost lost because Calyx ended. Calyx, they get 2 kills and Calyx just goes in and he's not bashing out or bashing in. He misses. It's just a train wreck and literally almost single-handedly throws it. Ilios Lighthouse, we get 2 picks again versus Boston and we lose this time because Calyx just runs in and dies. Struggled with rotates as well. So positioning, aggression, actually Full Sky second attack as well, where we actually got a couple of kills. They got a kill on us, so we're stabilizing. We're not exactly pushing. We're kind of holding our space, and Calyx ends with the break. Mispositions himself and gets himself killed, and which ends up being a full reset instead of a soft reset. So that needs to be cleaned up. Needs to prioritize pocketing / enabling DPS pressure against harder dives. So please, you don't have to be permanently stacked with your Zen at all times. There are times when you can position yourself on splits and pack your Zen totally fine, but more importantly, enable your DPS so that your Zen doesn't have to get pressured so much on the dive in the first place. So did not do a great job pocketing our DPS as much as he could have. Micro versus dive was okay. The playing versus the monkey was all right. Mechanics were not great with their whip shots. That could have been a lot cleaner. Armor pack usage mediocre. Again, not going to go into the micro, but could have been a lot cleaner. Lucio, beats were frequently wasted or used too early. The fight's lost, it's over, or we've won and we're still beating. Too early, in other words, it's fine to beat, to push, but your team needs to be actually in combat. You do not beat and then push, you push and then you beat. So beats were not consistently well used. There are a lot of wasted beats. Amp usage was also a big problem. A lot of amp speed when we're not going anywhere, we're not kiting anything, we're not pushing really hard. So you're wasting that resource. A lot of HP could have been used there from amp heal later on, or if we'd actually wanted to pursue later on, we would have had the amp available. Amp usage was not good. Our management also not good. Still way too much speed. So we were a relatively passive positioner, right? Which is fine. I think that's generally the more recommended way of playing Lucio in this current meta. But why are we in speed? We're not moving anywhere. You want speed on your wall trades and then swap back to heals the second that you can. And I don't know the stats in Calyx, but I would bet the farm that his heal output compared to other Lucios is actually remarkably low. Because we're literally charging beats significantly lower or slower than the enemy Lucio just based off of that. And that's also a big thing, not just because of the beat charge, but because obviously you're not healing your team enough, right? Your team gets benefit from that. And also, it forces your BAP to have to do this a lot, right? Oh, because the little chip healing here and there, maybe he has to shift himself just because you're sitting too much on speed, right? Your BAP would like to focus on weapon play. Your BAP would love to play Soldier 76 and not have to worry about much healing at all. But if your Lucio is spending too much time on speed and not getting value out of it, then that's not going to be happening. Mechanics weren't particularly good either. And then a minor thing versus dive, he needs to be marking Tracer more consistently. He marked the Tracer and then looked at Monkey, that's fine. But then he kept looking at Monkey, who was no longer a threat, and then the Tracer went in and basically single-handedly won them the fight. And this was on Lijiang Tower Garden. Ashe, Blase, not good. May, wall could have used versus dive, could have been a little better. Good walls in Brawl though. Ults were fine, uncreative with positioning, very stacked, no off-angle timing or pressure at all. And there's circumstances with May where that's actually the play. Again, that just seems to be London Spitfire's curse, is it's permanently. Or hard funny splits. So there's nothing like in between. Mechanics are okay. Junkrat, Reptire value low. Not a lot of Reptires. It's kind of hard to get a good read on this one. Some felt like wasted. Definitely a couple just caught nothing whatsoever. Permanently stacked on main. Again, that just seems to be London Spitfire's curse, is there's no splits, no assassination, no flank pressure at all. Not getting support there, to be very fair. This is on Junkrat, Doom, and May. Not very supported on these angles, but also never really trying to. Doomfist engage cycle's not always clean, so our ins and outs not always clean. Got ourselves picked a couple of times. Pressure output could have been a little better as well in terms of the micro. Needs better support from team. So when we go in, I need better support from the team. Again, map control issues with London Spitfire. No angle, no pressure. Could be a lot better. Missed too many punches as well. Reaper, positioning sloppy on BAP, in regards to cover high ground. Could have been more disciplined around high ground positioning and cover. Lamps were not good, often wasted, used early or late. We're lamping somebody, a May that has an ice block. We're stacking a lamp with beat. We're stacking an enemy window, but the window poses literally no threat to us whatsoever. So lamp usage, or now we're in a lamp, but the lamp is already wasted. So we could blame ping some of those, but honestly, the lamp usage was just not good, regardless of ping. Window usage was not consistently good. A lot of windows wasted in lost fights, not placed particularly well, too aggressively positioned. So it was too easy for the enemy team to play around it. Shifted too early, so I've adjusted my shift expectations to, it doesn't have to be just used for self-heal, but it needs to be used mid-fight, not pre-fight, because you're going to be wasting the duration of that shift, even if it is more for team support. So there was a lot of shift usage that could have been cleaned up. Mechanics and weapon play were not good, so the aim, the damage heal balance, again, not very good. It does like the fish for enemy BAPs, so something to kind of keep in mind. It does tend to prioritize looking to shoot to enemy BAPs, which I think is good. But if you're playing up against London, be careful. Zen positioning was poor. Wide peaks, so swinging too wide of corners and cover. Risks himself getting killed. Did get killed a couple times. Not finding corners or cover consistently. And then again, we talked about this earlier, giving high ground frequently. So positioning with Reaper and Zen, not good. Cooling usage was okay in terms of Harmony and Discord, in terms of pocketing people and off angles, prioritizing the right people, the most aggressive and threatening enemies. Mechanics were pretty inconsistent. It was hard to get a good read in his mechanics. I was not impressed with his mechanics, but sometimes he'd go, oh, that was a pretty good couple of shots there. Volskaya Industries' second defense, I think his mechanics look pretty good, but most of the time, not particularly special. Molfig, Zarya bubble positioning into grab needs work. Way too many fights lost because of grab pulse. We talked about this. You need to either position more defensively if you don't have bubbles, or more aggressively when you, or save bubbles, excuse me. One or the other. A lot of fights where my Zarya and Brig are getting grabbed and both are dying when they could have positioned split more, or I could have been saving bubble more, or I should not have been that aggressive when they had grab pulse. Just a lot of different things like that need to be cleaned up. Missed bubble and Hadi a couple times. Either for peeling backline or whatever, and that communicational situation needs to be sorted out, because it looked like Hadi was expecting bubble, but we were not in position to bubble Hadi there. So gave up high ground positioning. Again, it's like the London Spitfire curse, giving up high ground positioning. Bullets are rolled first and second attack a couple times. Like, wait, why are we dropping there? That makes no sense. So that needs to be cleaned up. Mechanics are fine. Sigma, positioning in Brawl is a big problem. Main botting, in other words, sitting on main, not splitting, not creating off-angle pressure, not just a lot of time spending on Rhine Shield. We're vulnerable to May now, we're vulnerable to Rhine Swings, we're vulnerable to Shatters, we're vulnerable to Dragons, we're vulnerable to so much crap if we just main bot, and that was a big problem. And it's also not just what you're vulnerable to, it's a lack of pressure that you're putting on the enemy team from your own contribution, but also by stacking more, it puts a lot more pressure on your DPS who are off angling. So we need to be more consistent at splitting to enable our own DPS. This is a big problem, and especially a couple maps in particular. Lijiang Tower Control Center was a big one. Havana was also big. So a lot of positional issues with their Sigma. Waste Rock early in brawls, so catching shields. Rock is not a cooldown that you use early in brawl almost ever. It is always a cooldown you use mid to late fight, because there's fewer cooldowns like shields and things like that get in your way. And there's generally, as the fight evolves, a big CC that's a little hard to land from a distance is a lot more viable, because there's going to be enemies that are up close in your grill, and that also will lead to kills. So I do not like our rock usage. A lot of rocks that just didn't get anything done. If we'd waited literally 2 or 3 seconds, there was, oh my gosh, if we'd rocked that person, they would have gotten chunked, or they would have died. Please. Mechanics were decent. Shield management was decent. Diva, Peel okay versus Doom. Matrix management was okay. Not very aggressive with backline trades or pressure. To be fair, a lot of time that Molfig was playing Diva, he was playing into a Doomfist, where you're going to have a little bit more conservative positioning to peel your own backline. But would have liked to seen situations when they were not in Doomfist, him positioning a little more aggressively around backline mid-fight pressure, and just basically pressure / Matrix usage to bait a lot of attention to take heat off of his team. Micro missiles usage could have been cleaned up. a little sloppy. It's not a lot of value, but it is value that you can be using for pressure on kills, pressure on shields, things like that. Wasn't super consistent. Main botting, giving up good angles. Again, defensively, offensively, a lot of situations where we just didn't need to be stacked behind rain shield there. That was not the best position on the map. You can go on literally a fight-by-fight basis and be like, well, we could have been here instead of here, and here instead of here. And there's a lot of times where you could have nitpicked better positioning for Molfig consistently on DVED. Okay, hybrid. McCree, 2 aggro in main mid-fight, so got picked a couple of times unnecessarily because we're like sticking our nose up a Rhine. Didn't need to happen. Mechanics looks solid, but streaky. Chokes and flashes often. So mechanics, sometimes I was like, whoa, wow, those are some nice shots, mate. And then we flash somebody and we miss the shots. Now, obviously, we're all thinking of the King's Row Hanzo, the infamous, what was it, 10 missed shots on a Hanzo. But that wasn't it. It just seemingly had a problem in general with flashing and actually finishing kills. I saw at least, I think, 5 times in the several maps that I watched where we would flash somebody and just completely whiff. And that's a problem. That's a big problem. So he misses the easy stuff, very streaky. Some stuff where it's like, that should be very easily, okay, we're missing that. But then also some of the greatest shots that I've seen from McCree, from any McCree that I've reviewed. So very streaky. Hanzo, Sonics were usually fine. Dragons could have been placed better. Positioning with angles was poor, very conservative, very boring. A lot of the Hanzo play that we've seen has been almost playing it like a jungle gym, right? Using the wall climb, the angle control, the ability to be really anywhere at any point in time creatively for extra pressure. And he was very unimaginative, very like blasé, boring, and conservative use. And again, this is kind of the problem with London in general. He wasn't necessarily being supported on those angles particularly well either, but his pressure in Hanzo was lower than it should have been. Timing was off on angles as well, so when he did take angles, he was often too early and got himself cleared, so he's grabbing a health back while his team is pushing. Stormbow mechanics not great. The timing of it was okay, but a lot of Stormbow mechanical usage, just missing basically all of the shots. Overall mechanics were not particularly amazing on Hanzo. Ash. Could have been pocketed aggressing more between enemy aggro cycles and dives. In other words, he could have been playing a little more aggressively against more brawly style dives if he'd been supported better, which he was not, but something that we could be working on. Not consistently synced with Hattie, usually, but not always. And that needs to be cleaned up. In terms of like Hattie's going in, that's when you aggress a little more. Dynamites were good. No complaints generally. Bobs were mostly fine. Mechanics are good. So this was a little bit of a surprise for me. So I think everybody was like pooping on Hybrid, right? But Hybrid's Ash, here's your hot take. Hybrid's Ash was the best Ash that I have scouted in terms of positional and mechanics. So this was a little bit of a surprise for me. I know that he was something that a lot of people were sleeping on, and I wasn't particularly super hot in him, but he, at least with his Ash and to a lesser extent his McCree, really was proving me wrong. When Hybrid is on Ash, and like I said, to a lesser extent McCree, he is not the problem of the London Spitfire in terms of the macro and individual weaknesses. It is not Hybrid's fault. So there's your hot take. All right, Symmetra. Turret usage was not great. Missing the triple turret opener and Legion Tower Control Center. So in other words, when you roll out in Control Center with the Symmetra Brawl, you are going to TP, charge your right click, turn the corner on that white choke where everybody fights, release your right click, and then 1, 2, 3, instantly turret on the high ground right above the choke. And that creates a lot of pressure. If they stop and break the turrets, or even if they shoot them as they're coming on, that's a lot of pressure that's away from your team. That's off of your team. That does more than like a secondary right click would. And then from there you can just charge up your beam. So he wasn't doing that. He just was not throwing the turrets out, or he was throwing them out very late. It was bizarre. When he could have been beaming, right? Mid-fight you don't want to be throwing turrets, you want to be beaming. A lot of defensive TP bombs. In other words, we're on defense, we have map control. Why are we saving turrets for TP bomb? You could be putting them behind walls and cover. You have a defensive advantage. That's a better use for turrets than TP bombs, in my opinion. Using the mid-fight when we could be beaming instead, so throwing out a turret here when I could be just beaming what's in front of me with a tier 3 beam. Not placing them very well versus dive. In other words, need to control off angles, right? Don't just save them for a TP bomb on an Ana. That's just no good. It's not enough value. And then mid-fight, there's a little lull in the action. There's nothing to shoot for a brief second. And we have 3 turrets. Are we saving it for a TP bomb? I don't really know. And I wasn't a big fan of his turret usage. Walls are okay. But yeah, overall, Hybrid was not phenomenal outside of his Ash and to a lesser extent his McCree's. Hanzo not great, Symmetra not great, but he wasn't like actually hard trolling. Now I did not watch a lot of the first couple of games, so keep that in mind, but at least as of recently, Hybrid has not looked to be a major weakness with the London Spitfire, despite what Reddit may think. Map, etc., Legion Tower Control Center, just a couple of things. Really need to clean up your execution on Legion Tower Control Center. The fact that nobody controls White Room and or we'll stack 6 through white room instead of splitting pressure on main and controlling angles here. The angle / map control from London Spitfire was consistently just absolutely atrocious on a Legion Tower control center. And this significantly reduced Hybrid's impact on McCree, Blaze's impact on Junkrat, and Molfik's impact on Sigma, not to mention putting a lot of extra pressure on Heidi on Ryan, who was sitting on main. So that needs to be sorted out. They need to look at the map and put Ryan on point, send Sigma Junkrat to clear out here. I do not want to see us windowing on main and 6 people standing behind the window while the enemy Ryan stands behind cover and they still control white. It's just absurd to me. Like, what are you going to look for? A random Junkrat bounce to one-shot their bat from across the map? Like, there's just no value there. You window on main, you make them stand AFK, and at the same time, you clear out white room with your Sigma Junkrat, maybe even your Lucio for a little bit. You will easily kill or spam out white, and then now you can start to spam the Ryan who's hiding from the window. And then now the enemy team actually has to push into you after your window, and it's almost as if you were defending the map now. And it just, in general, the fundamentals of map control were bad, but it was especially a problem on certain maps with Control Center where that fundamental cannot be missed. Blizzard World high ground control / cover usage, just again, backline positioning rearing its ugly head in terms of how important it is to control the high ground in second, how important it is to try and control the high ground on first if you're defending. Ilios Lighthouse, Briggs in, the high ground rollout. We need to do a better job of more aggressively punishing the enemy team before they dive. And then after they dive, if they fail their monkey jump on the high ground and they get knocked down again, please take that opportunity to peek aggressively and spam them, either with your Ash, your Zen, your Tracer, etc. Also, ball tracer, you don't need 2 people on point. If you're putting 2 people on point, then it's like having 3 people push card. You're reducing the impact. It's a small, you cap the point a little faster, but it's not worth what you lose elsewhere, because yes, your ball will put pressure on point. Yes, they'll probably mark someone on point, but I'd rather have my tracer in a better position to mark a backline on an angle or mark the enemy tracer than I would have my tracer to help my ball duel the Zarya, right? Who's going to be marking my ball on point. It just doesn't make any sense. So a lot of times we've got ball and tracer on point, and Shaq just isn't doing anything. I would much rather have just ball pressure point and then pocket my tracer while we're pushing high ground so that she can take some of the heat off of them diving us. That's much more valuable. Also, last thing, please don't put Blase and Ash. Please put him on Hanzo, on Torb. I don't care. Obviously, the meta is going to change a little bit, so maybe this is kind of defunct, or not defunct, but as a kind of obsolete. But please just put him on a comfort hero. Like, he just does not look comfortable in Ash. It doesn't have to be a meta composition. It can be, Torb. Like, let them troll you for playing Torb, but at least you have a higher win percentage because he's good on that hero. His Ash is it's just a weakness. I don't know why we're forcing a meta composition that the guy is clearly not comfortable on. It just does not look good. And there are other options that you can make theoretically work, right? Just not Ash. Okay, so overall, like I said, I did have some internal bias. I do want the London Spitfire to do well this season. I'm not really a fan of many teams, but London is one of them. So I'd love for them to do well. I try to be as honest as I can, and I know I came across probably pretty blunt and a little rude, and I just kind of do that in general in these scouting reports. But it's my intention is to help these teams actually fix these issues. I know these are titled scouting reports, but the real value, I think, here and what I'm trying to do is expose issues so that the teams can have the opportunity to address them, to improve upon them, to correct these issues so that we can have a better viewing experience, but also that these teams can just find more success to their team. So I hope that these guys do better this season. Like I said, they're just a couple things individually, a couple of macro things that need to be adjusted. But again, I wish these guys the best of luck. Hope you guys found this entertaining, and I will see you in the next scouting report.